Be heard. Okay, good point. You want me to just take this one? Okay. I'm not gonna test, test. Yep. Okay.
I know she's thinking about it. She's probably already called somebody to have her call her at the most opportune time. I have an emergency. I have to go.
Good to see you. Oh, okay, we're live. Sorry, we didn't realize that. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sage, the chair, the Asheville Regional Housing Consortium. I'd like to welcome you to our November 2nd, 2023 meeting. It's going to be a little different today as we're all here in person, so thank you everybody for making the trip. And we have really one large agenda item. We're going to introduce Dennis here in a minute, but rather than me doing a roll call, how about, oh, we can't go around the room because we don't have microphones, can we? We're going to go around the room, introduce yourself real quick, say where you're from, and then we're going to come back and start the meeting, okay?
Sounds great. Hey, Sam Starbaum, City of Asheville, Planning and Urban Design Department. Good to be here.
Emily Brewer, City of Brevard, Senior Planner.
Jennifer Miranda, Henderson County Budget Analyst.
Liz Hanson, Planner Henderson County also. Transylvania County, Kate Hayes.
Forrest Gillum, representing Madison County. Jeff Adams, Pennsylvania County.
Eric Rufin, Planning and Zoning Director with Town of Fletcher. Preston Blakely on the Mayor of Fletcher.
Robin Merrill, representing Town of Marshall.
Matt Cable, Buckley County Community Development.
Jonathan Jones, Community Development Analyst for Buncombe County.
And Alley City staff.
I'm Steve Latham. I work for TDA Consulting, and we've been retained by the city to help with their home program.
Christina Harris.
That's great. Thank you, everybody. It's really nice to see you all in person, really. And with that, I'm going to introduce Dennis Newbern, our new Community Development Division Manager, right? Oh, it's up there. I got it right. Okay. Yes, Dennis has joined us. It's been 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
It doesn't feel like that. It's been almost 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah, almost
You've been here
6
6 months?
Yeah, almost.
I'm so sorry. 6 months?
Almost. Still in the 5, but.
That's embarrassing. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. But he is going to be helping us greatly with this board, or this body. And you're going to hear a lot from him today. So I don't think we need to approve any minutes or anything, right? We're just going to move right into you. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Dennis. This is Dennis, y'all. And just for, I guess, a little awareness in the room, we do have cameras pointing. This presentation will be up. We've got cameras pointing over here. So when we get to comment, we will, I guess, come up, either pass you a mic or you can make it here. But we're going to be listening for a little while first. Go ahead, Dennis. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to all of you here. Hi, Tracy. Emily, you get a special award because you were the first one here today. So you get to leave first today. And the goal is by at least 5 o'clock you can go. Okay? Fair enough. Okay. As for the rest of you, you get to stay the entire time. I'm dressed up today because I'm trying to make a good impression on you, but it'll be the last time that you'll see me like this, okay? And so the other thing for housekeeping purposes, Nikki Reed, our department director, is in the background. She's nervous, so keep an eye on her today, okay? Make sure she doesn't pass out. So with respect to, I guess, me, there are a few things that I would like for you to know. Some of you I've met. Jeff, we've met before, a few others, and Vice Chair Robin, the folks from Buncombe County, and of course Tracy, who I spoke to a few minutes ago, well, actually maybe less than an hour ago, and asked her to talk a little bit about one of the subjects we're going to be talking about today. And I gave her plenty of notice, so, but it's only 2 slides, so she should be okay. Jeff, good to see you again. With respect to housing, a couple of things that I'd like for you to know about me. I am a longtime old houser, and my tenure in this profession dates back, let's just put it this way. The Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, I started in the profession not too terribly long after that. So I go back to the 312 housing days. I go back to rental rehabilitation. I go back to and was actually a part of a committee that created what you now know as the home program. In addition to that, I've been involved in several other programs over the years, including Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, which is primarily my love, as well as HUD-NEPA environmental reviews. So I feel like that with this subject that there's probably not too much that I don't know. And by the way, I also spent almost 5 years as a nonprofit developer myself. So I am very empathetic to the plight, or sympathetic rather, to the plight of developing housing with nonprofit organizations. The hassle, the love associated with the end result, the hassle of trying to raise money, understanding all the different funding sources that are part of the equation, arguing with public officials like myself to try to make activities happen, and at the end of the day, that wonderful ribbon cutting where we ensure the promise of providing affordable housing to people that need it in our communities. I also spent nearly 10 years working in rural America. Water and wastewater was kind of an aside, but I had the opportunity to work primarily in California. Believe it or not, there's a lot of rural stuff in California, but also as far west as Guam. So I come to you with an experience that's kind of multifaceted. CDBG has always been my first love, home second, and not necessarily because I love it, but because it exists. Home forces us to do things a lot differently than perhaps several years ago. And the beauty of that is at the end of the day, the public-private partnership that's associated with the home program is the engine that creates affordable housing. Without that partnership, the likelihood is great that we would even have less affordable housing available in our communities. So the idea of being engaged with current partners from the nonprofit world here, but also the ability to attract more down the road for other projects is huge. The very idea that as we go forward, the wonderful work that's been started here in Asheville and Buncombe County with respect to reparations and the things that will come out of that that will help us to provide better housing opportunities, or at least be in a better position to fully understand the plight of all people associated with the need for affordable housing is what we do. Now, specifically as it relates to the home program, and this home program in particular, I've had a chance to go through, and Steve is here as he introduced himself from TDA, Training and Development Associates, long-time technical development agency, and actually I worked for a competitor agency several years ago, so I'm familiar with their work. One of the things that was of paramount importance to Nikki, to the administration, and to our staff was taking a look at our housing programs and figuring out how we could implement and frankly do better. And we've done that. But in that review, there were some things that we needed to look, we looked at it and we saw that we needed to address, things that we need to do differently. Things that will put us in a position to be able to provide more dollars down the road for affordable housing needs, things that will allow us to be much more sensitive to rural housing needs within our 4 county areas, and also to look at from a long-range perspective of where we find ourselves at now and where we hope to go, where we need to go down the road desperately. As I said to the chair a few moments ago, I'm new to this area. I've been here almost 6 months. Finding housing is very, very, very difficult. Very difficult. I can't imagine what it would be like if I worked in a service sector position and tried to find a place to live here. So the very work that you all do every day to provide housing opportunities for persons who identify as low to moderate income has not been lost on me. It's our hope, I know Nikki's hope as well, that we can continue to partner and build upon helping to address this very important need of affordable housing. To get there, we got to talk about the home program, and I'm not sure at what point I'm going to put this down and start talking, so if I do, make me pick it back up. Okay. So, just kind of a little discussion about the consortium. You were founded in 1993, and you were founded primarily because the legislation at that time authorizing the home program recognized that there were going to be many instances based upon the formula associated with the home program that rural areas, areas that didn't qualify, probably would not be able to participate in this program. So one of the things that was looked upon and looked at and actually included was the ability for cities, towns, counties that were contiguous in nature to basically form a group known as a consortium to be able to pool resources to direct long-range planning, if you will, towards affordable housing, and from there create programs and services that would address the needs that we're talking about today. Now, you'll note there's a word called important, and I'm going to be talking about this several times. I'm going to talk about your relationship as a body. I'm going to talk about the city of Asheville and its relationship, and our relationship as the City of Asheville Community and Economic Development Department. So the home program, for those of you who have never used it or not familiar with it, in its simplest form to implement local housing strategies designed to increase home ownership opportunities for low to very low income Americans. Typical HUD programs, this one is no different from that, even though the legislation is a little bit different. Same thing. Grants, loans, direct loans, loan guarantees, rental assistance, all the things that you could possibly be doing with those funds, that's what we're talking about, including things that this consortium has never been involved in before. The match, the most important thing about this program at the end of the day as part of the public-private partnership is what are the partners bringing to the table. And as part of our evaluation process, this discussion on the word match is going to continue coming up. So that's why I have it there. Rehab, home buyer acquisition, new or construction, rental development, which we've primarily done here, and some tenant-based rental assistance are really the primary programs that work under this program, and that's what basically has been done in the four-county area. Participating jurisdiction for purposes of language under the home program. Participating jurisdiction means city, it means state, as opposed to other HUD programs we're referred to as grantee, CDBG primarily. I want to talk with you about what our responsibilities are as your PJ and kind of go through with illustrations of where we've hit the mark, where we have not hit the mark, and what we're going to have to do things a little bit differently. Now, I said a moment ago, and I'm going to go back to this slide. Asheville City Council is the responsible legal entity. I need for you to understand that because going forward, I'm always going to make reference to that body. I'll talk about this one too and your role, but I'm going to really harp on the role of the City Council. And by the time I'm done today, you'll understand why I am doing that, okay? Housekeeping, if you have a question in the middle of my talking, stop me, okay? So, as the PJ, the legal entity, the manager of the funds that you get, that we have received over the years, and hope and pray that we still continue to get, I'm going to go through what our responsibilities are. And then I'm going to talk about the role of the consortium. So, as the PJ, we are completely responsible for all of the long-range planning efforts that happen, and they occur every 5 years. The work that you do, the money that we receive, is based upon your input and the Asheville City Council's passage of a 5-year consolidated plan. That plan identifies what we believe to be, what you all believe to be, all of the needs associated with housing and housing support services that take place or that could take place over a 5-year period, along with the identification of revenue sources to address those needs, and then prioritizing those needs in a manner and based upon funding that we have to address those needs. Now, COVID kind of changed all of that, and it made us rethink how we do business, or at least how we should be doing business. And the effects of that will go forward as we begin our next consolidated planning process. But the consolidated plan itself is a fluid document. It is a planning tool that is designed, as I said a few moments ago, to highlight those things that we believe, that you believe as a consortium, are priority in the delivery of housing and housing support services. That is the participating jurisdiction's responsibility to prepare that document. It is not done in a vacuum. It has to be done with all of the partners, including every member of the consortium. The check documents are the annual action plan. The annual action plan is the one-year spinoff from the 5-year plan that we tell HUD, based upon community involvement, what we're going to be doing. And on the back end, the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, or the CAPER, is reporting on what we did during the year that just ended based upon what we said we were going to do within the 5-year period. The PJ has responsibility for all of that reporting. In addition to that, all of the obligations and the execution of our program, including the development of applications. Yes, the formal, actual, physical part of the development of the application. Why? Because developing an application is not quite as simple as saying this is what you're going to do. When you're using federal dollars to develop an application, we have to be completely cognizant of the fact that the application cannot be viewed as discriminatory. So there's that, and there are laws that address that, and I'll talk about that in a few moments too. Match requirements. There are minimum match requirements for the use of most home funds. We have the ability as the PJ to ask for more. Remember the public-private partnership. The proof in that is the amount of money that's being included in the project from other sources that are required by the PJ. Consolidated plan requirements, I just spoke about that. Project review procedures. Someone submits an application for funding consideration. Prior to recommendation of award, there has to be a process that sets forth how we're going to review that application for compliance, for need, for benefit, and lastly, to determine how much public dollars should be included in that activity. Another function of the PJ. Thank you, sir. Property standards. I am old enough to remember a time when you could go into virtually any urban community and identify what was a HUD-funded project. Thank goodness those days are over. Design, and location continue to be a very important part of developing and funding a project. That is also a responsibility of the PJ. The affordability period, based upon the use of home funds, there is a minimum affordability requirement associated with our funds. In the last couple of years, perhaps even more than that for this community, the challenge of acquiring housing has been very difficult. The realization that once for affordable housing projects, that once the affordability period ends, the likelihood is great in this region of the United States that those things are going to go market rate quickly, which reduces the supply of affordable housing. So in many cases, while many communities have adopted a 20-year strategy for affordable housing, it may be time to rethink that in this area of the United States. Not saying we're doing it, saying we may need to rethink it. Because, trust me, 20 years goes by very, very quickly. And there are scores of investors that are looking for those properties to go offline and buy them up. Developer agreements. Oh yeah, if we're going to give a developer money, we had better have developed if not an ironclad agreement, one that we can defend in court if we have to. That's the responsibility of the PJ. Monitoring for the life of the project, that is a major requirement of the PJ. And we get checked by our funding source, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, to make certain that we are making certain that as a result of giving the developer money, that they are complying with the terms and conditions of the development agreements that we have prepared. Match and match tracking. We've had this program since the inception of it, and so there's a lot of match money that's available for projects to reduce the amount of private contributions associated with the program. We still are going to require a match, and so that's a responsibility, a function of the PJ to make certain that we maintain a match log and we know how many dollars we have available to assist with projects. Recaptured funds. They come about as a result of a project going offline, going belly up, a developer not doing what they said they were going to do. We have that responsibility to enforce that and to redistribute those funds as well as to manage them. Technical assistance. There are a lot of organizations that have the wherewithal to become engaged in affordable housing. Do not know that. We have the responsibility to provide technical assistance to our current partners as well as organizations that have an interest in becoming involved in developing affordable housing. Staff support. You have a wonderful number of people that work for the City of Asheville Community and Economic Development Department that do all sorts of things related to our programs. A few of them are here. Christina Harris and Thana Alley. Deborah Johnson's online. I think Laura Neer is online also. Christina, of whom if you do not know her, she's the one waiting for the phone call so she can slip out. Christina will maintain oversight over this program, so it is important that you get to know her from this point on. So in its purest form, you're going to develop 168 units of rental housing, right? And you've picked an area that you think best meets what we as a funder would like to see. And an example of that is, and consistent with home rules, the siting of this particular location is in an area that is on a bus line that's close to healthcare, a hospital, not in a food desert, yada, yada, yada. Can walk comfortably around the area without getting hit. But also, in relationship to the community itself, is this going to be an albatross in terms of it's going to be something from a design standpoint that clearly does not fit into the design confines of that neighborhood? That's a problem, and here's why. It's the same reason it's a problem on the simplest scale as someone who grew up in a trailer park. They are identified by where they live. They are stigmatized by what it looks like. So the very idea of developing projects with a design that is based within the confines of a community at its immediate point makes a lot of sense. And it's where we failed in the beginning of time of not doing that. Now we design projects in such a manner that at the end of the day, hey, I wouldn't mind living there. Okay?
It makes sense, except we each have our own local. Basically, it makes perfect sense. Except how specific that is. If it's just the HUD rules, because we each have our own local, we have our own communities and our own discussions that we had. Obviously, the zoning process is going to be taken all the.
Absolutely.
How does that work if it's something that's going on in Asheville or Marshall? That's what I'm wondering.
Good question. So from, I'll use myself, even though I just started this 3 weeks ago, okay? I'm more interested in what you tell me about what this is going to look like and how you arrived at that conclusion. What was the methodology that was used? You know, if it's a place that I wouldn't live in because the outside is green, that's my own personal thing, and that's something I got to get over or just not go there, put on sunglasses, okay? But the question is it something that people who would be living there or would like to live there, is it a place that they feel like, that looks like would represent them? And the other thing that I have to be cognizant of as part of the review process is you ain't the only folks doing an affordable housing project. There may be somebody else 2 blocks over. So, you know, their design might be nicer, it might have pools, it might have tennis courts. So, you know, part of my discussion with you is that what's this gonna look like, what's the neighborhood gonna look like in 15 years? At least during the affordability period. Have you thought about that? So, you know, all of those things are part of the discussion, okay? Now, are there things that we would say, in this case, I would say that could be a concern? Yeah. What's it near? You know, I'm going to look at environmental justice regulations and figure out that, you know, maybe this thing is sited near a dump where the utility company emptied their transformers, and the transformers emitted PCPs all over the place, and there was not any cleanup, and this is in a relatively short place or short distance of where you're talking about right now. We might have some discussion about that. But in any event, any discussion that we would have regarding design would be based upon standards that are approved by both you all and both the council before proceeding. My personal preference has nothing to do with it at the end of the day. Okay, yes? Income targeting. We haven't talked about that here before, I don't think, but there are, and I am told on a regular basis, that we need to look at approving projects that target certain income groups. Senior housing is one, but what about that other group that nobody messes with, and that's the folks from 0 to 30% of AMI. Landlords won't touch them because you got to have entirely too much subsidy to house that group. So we don't talk about them. We talk about the groups that most likely are going to be able to receive housing that require the least amount of subsidy, which is that 60 to 80%, and actually 51 to 60. Developer capacity. Oh, Christina used to be a developer. Never seen anything she's done, but she knows all about it. Get those kind of conversations all the time. Developer comes in and they have an idea that they want to do 120 units of something or other, and they've never done it before. They have no clue. So what are your funding sources? What's that? I'm going to go to the bank and get everything from the bank. You're probably going to have a big gap. How are you going to fill it? Prayer. So discussions about developer capacity and making certain that we get it right on the front end is going to be critical to activities that we recommend for funding. Now, the discussion that nobody talks about is fair housing and equal opportunity. Let me tell you, I have had the honor of being involved in working with developers that discriminated. And I say it's an honor because to use my talent and skill to eradicate that problem is something that needed to happen and will continue to. Fair housing and equal opportunity from a planning standpoint, from an implementation standpoint, and from an affordability standpoint is the responsibility of the PJ. Folks discriminate. Our job is to make certain that they don't. Our job is to make certain that they understand that everybody is afforded the opportunity to have a place that's safe, decent, and sanitary. And it's their job, and it's our job as the PJ to make sure that that happens throughout the life of the loan. NEPA, HUD Environmental Review. Probably one of the best civil rights laws ever passed by the Nixon administration. I say that because I have seen, you all have seen, many examples of developments that have happened on places where they should have never have happened, without any regard to the physical environment, without any regard to the air, without any regard to the surrounding conditions associated where people live. So this law, these laws, both the National Environmental Protection Act and HUD Environmental Review laws require us to go into a very deep dive in order to make certain that we are providing safeties and the sanitary conditions and, if necessary, recommending mitigation actions to correct past practices associated with land use. You can tell by that statement this is one of my favorite subjects. The Uniform Relocation Act, I pray we don't have to use it, but occasionally it happens. Occasionally we get into a situation whereby the last resort rule has to take place and we really need that land, or you do, to do a development, and sometimes it affects a business or a residence. The tool is there, the law is rough, it's an unforgiving law, and it's our job as the PJ to enforce it. Prevailing wage, we try to stay away from home-funded projects with 12, actually 11, the rule says 12, but I say 11 units or more. We try to stay away from that. So home, at least for purposes of our discussion, is talking about money going into units, okay? And our goal is to not generally fund on a project more than 11 units, because if we do, then it triggers prevailing wage, which brings an entirely different layer to the course of your project. Now remember, these are all things that the PJ does. These are all the things that we get checked on by HUD. This is you. Now let me explain this. This really bothers me. Sorry. Let me explain this. I've looked at several hours of tape. I've spoken to several people, including my director. I've spoken to HUD on several occasions. And the one thing that was crystal clear to me is that we, as the PJ, did not properly explain what the role of the consortium is. So I'm going to do that. Everything that you just heard, with the exception of the consolidated planning process, has nothing to do with the consortium. What does have to do with the consortium is this. What is the policy on how are we going to spend this money that we get in terms of within our 4 counties? What are we going to do to make certain that we have identified properly the needs associated with affordable housing in our 4 counties and their cities, our members, and figure out a way how we can subsidize their efforts? Now, if there is a problem with a home-funded project through this consortium, the funding source will never talk to you. They will talk to Nikki, me, and the chair. Because at the end of the day, the chair, the council, excuse me, of which she is a member, is the group that makes the determination on what's going to happen in the consortium. Why? Because back in 2003, when you formed this, that's what you said you wanted them to do. And that is our function. And our function as the PJ is to provide guidance and advice to you all about the best way to go based upon long-range planning efforts and to advise the council on the best practices, the best use of home funds associated with a development deal. Now, to get to that point, and past practice has been here, but to get to that point, we have this task of not necessarily funding an activity because you have brought it here. The task is, the requirement is, the law is, the pain is looking at every aspect of your proposed development and figuring out why you shouldn't get what you have asked for. At the end of that process, we, as the PJ, come with a conclusion. This developer, based upon everything that we have seen, everything that the rules say that we're supposed to do, we have come to the conclusion that this is what they should get, or they shouldn't get anything at all. That's a little bit different than how we've been operating here. And I need to tell you this for a couple of reasons. At the end of the day, the PJ recommends to the council approves, but guess who is the certifying person in HUD's Integrated Disbursement Information System? Me. And I will never certify a project that I do not believe meets the requirements associated with the home program. So you will be learning specifically what those requirements are, and that's why Steve is here. He'll not be talking about today. We'll be talking about it in another session. And it's important because there are some things right now in my short tenure that have been brought to my attention that are looking for funding based upon a rumor that there's money available. And the answer is, why would we recommend to the council funding any activity that has not been properly vetted by the PJ? Even if they call me, even if they write me a note and say, we need more money. Well, the rules say I can't just give you more money because you're asking for it. The rules say I need to go back and do a review. And at the end of that review, I may need to tell you, you need to do less houses. Or if you're bent on spending this money, you may need to dip into your profits in order to fund it, because we won't do it. Because I can't justify the use of public money, federal public money, into your development deal when there's a couple of things. One, we do development, you do development, I've done it because of the love and the need to provide affordable housing. But at the end of the day, it's still a business, and you're in business to make money. And part of filling the gap is so you can make more money doing what you do. Is it our responsibility as the PJ to fill your gap completely so that you get all you can get? No. And that's the process with the home funds. So evaluating projects that will allow us to stay true to the rules, evaluating projects that will allow us to get the maximum amount of units available for a project that addresses design, that addresses environment, that addresses fair housing and equal opportunity. Those are the things that we will look at going forward, that we need to look at going forward, because when we get reviewed by HUD, we need to make certain that we're doing it right. And if we're not, guess who pays the money back? Not the consortium, the city of Asheville, because you have entrusted the city of Asheville with the responsibility of managing the program in accordance with the rules. So with respect to all that, that's why there's only one bullet point for this. Now, the non-binding guidance is crucial. And as we go through, as we become BFFs as an organization, as we meet, we're going to ask for your guidance with respect going forward of what we need to take a look at, do differently, do better. You know, Jeff and I met early on, and Before that, I met with Tori a few times in your community. Tori, you know, we don't use the words workforce housing here, but you know, think about it. A lot of businesses are not able to stay open because they can't attract the people to work for them because the people that need to work, they can't find a place to live. So, you know, taking all of that in consideration becomes very much a part of where we're going to go, what we need to do, and soon. So, a few more slides and I'll be done. And I promise you we'll get out of here before 7. Okay, I moved it up. 6:30. Got some goals in mind that the chair, the vice chair, Nikki and I have spoken about. I want to share some of them with you for this upcoming year. Yep, y'all need some training. It's okay. You can take the information back to your respective communities and do more, do better, and understand more of where we're coming from with respect to where we're going. There needs to be a project evaluation process. I'm big on lawsuits. And let me explain what that means. If you're in this business of being in the public realm long enough, you're going to get sued. Now, there's the kind of suit where you know that you will win that thing, or ultimately there'll be some kind of settlement that'll come forward based upon the work that you've done or you haven't done. The problem ones are where you did something completely wrong or didn't do it at all, and now you've got to defend your action or lack thereof. You're going to lose. So, you know, if we're telling an organization that we're going to evaluate a proposal and we don't include everything that we need to evaluate that proposal justly, and we come back and say we're not going to fund you, you know, they've got a couple of options. One is to walk away renege, and the other is see you in court. So, you know, my job is to prepare us for the possibility of what could happen and to make certain that there's good information in place to be able to defend our position. The one that really scares me is our funding source. You don't do it right, you pay the money back. Could be a whole lot of money, you know, depending upon the project. So, training, technical assistance. The other thing about TA is that there are organizations out there, and within the city of Asheville, and also within Buncombe County, there has been an awful lot of work done regarding the subject of reparations. And as part of that discussion, one of the things that keeps coming up is a predecessor to our modern-day housing and community development programs. That predecessor program created a lot of harm across the United States. And, you know, I could go on from the 1949 Housing Act to the 1955 Surface Transportation Act and the fact that our cities have been split all across the United States and the whole 9 yards. I won't do that. That's nerdy stuff that I like to talk about. What I am going to say, though, is that the effects associated with all those past practices have created some irreparable harm as it relates to the pursuit of housing. So the very idea that part of the discussion of reparations will be there's going to be a need for additional housing. There's going to be a need for organizations to help address the need for more affordable housing. The idea of providing technical assistance, to have organizations like Steve's in place and on call to assist us, to assist them, is what I'm talking about. Affirmative fair housing marketing. So there's two discussions to this one. One is if there are more than 5 units involved in your development deal, there's this federal law that you've got to follow that makes sure, that's making certain that you are in fact marketing those units affirmatively. And we, as the PJ, have the responsibility of checking that annually. Now, there's another side. That side is this. My mother is 88, and she has a totally different view of what I'm getting ready to tell you. In my lifetime, attempting to find housing was not too terribly bad, but I have some horror stories too. But in my mother's time, there were laws against being able to procure housing as a renter, and even as a female. Those have changed, but the effects for people who are of that generation, they still linger. We have a responsibility to market our products to those people who are least likely to apply. And you are required to have a plan that addresses that. And it's our job as the PJ to enforce it. So there are two groups, and the people who are least likely to apply are not necessarily the elderly, but they also could be people who have disabilities. Everybody with me? Okay. Create an over-the-counter program. We currently do an application program once a year, and that's all wonderful and fine. But I would like to see consideration given to creating a program, and we do that primarily because we want to stay current or be available for folks who are applying for tax credits. But there are a lot of development activities that don't involve tax credits. Is it fair to them to make them wait once a year to apply? No. So if there's funding available, why can't we run it over the counter? So that's what over the counter means. Create a community housing development organization. A weird Chodo function. It gives them an advantage, and in larger cities where there's huge amounts of dollars for home funds, it makes sense for an organization, for organizations the size as small as ours, not so much, but we're required to at least attempt to have community development housing organizations. They are specialized nonprofit organizations generally that are engaged in affordable housing. There is a set aside for them annually associated with our home allotment. We need more. We need more in Asheville. We need more in Madison County. So the very idea of helping you all to cultivate that talent to deliver affordable housing makes sense. Provide TA to ABCLT, Asheville Buncombe County Community Land Trust. A land trust is another concept associated with affordable housing. They're only one. I am hoping that we can provide much more assistance to them because we need them. We need them as part of our arsenal to create more housing in the community. The CON plan and AFFH. Now, Thana, I'm ready for you for your slides. Tracy, I'm going to stop here for a moment, and I'd like for you to talk, if you would, about what we've spoken about thus far. She's going to bring up the two slides that you sent me, so either way. So I do believe that as part of long-range planning efforts, it makes perfect sense to have the MPO as part of the team to help guide us, to help identify those things that we need to address better from a local perspective, from a regional perspective, as it relates to housing and everything else associated with it. So I've been working with Tracy and Mary, and there are two immediate things that we'll be starting on in the near future. One is the 5-year consolidated plan, but the second one, and the one that's kind of immediate, I'll let Tracy talk about that, and then I'll come back after that.
Did you want me to talk about the proportion of funds and projects, or?
Okay.
Or both. All right. I'm showing up here. All right. Well, I'll just give y'all numbers, and then we'll talk about fair housing. So I ran the numbers for since 2020 to 2024, and the proportions, which unfortunately aren't showing up right now. Is there any way, sir, to plug in my my own laptop quickly or not? All right. So As far as the funds themselves went, so since 2020, 58% have gone to Buncombe. And then the next proportion was Henderson. I can share these with all of y'all after this meeting since the technology is not working right now. 16% for Henderson, 13 Transylvania, 9 Madison, 9%, and then 4% was just Asheville projects. Something about those numbers, though, within the Buncombe County percentage, 3 of the projects were shared, also benefited the city of Asheville. Yeah, sure. So Buncombe, and then Henderson is 16%. And as far as, so that's the money, all the total funds, and I'll definitely get y'all pretty slides after this. And as far as the number of projects, so over since 2020, 14 for Buncombe. 3 of those also overlapped with the city of Asheville, benefited Asheville. The ones that were just for the city of Asheville are 4. 4 projects for Madison County, 3 projects for Henderson County, 3 projects for Transylvania. Yeah, so just to give y'all those numbers. It's all in the, yeah, I'll clean the spreadsheet up. I didn't know I'd be presenting it today. So I'll clean it up and make it, and make it really digestible for y'all and make sure everybody gets it. Because it'll show you all the information that has been tracked. Yeah. So, whether or not some of these were tenant-based rental assistance projects or new construction. I also noticed because, the consortium represents multiple jurisdictions. So if we want to talk about how we're tracking the data a bit more, because some of these were just, like I noticed there was one that was built in Brevard, but under the umbrella of, benefiting Transylvania County. So if y'all want to talk about, would we like to maybe better track the localities a bit more closely instead of just countywide? The only city that's pulled out of all that data is Asheville. And I know I think HUD likes to see the county numbers, right? But if the consortium, that shouldn't be too hard to track moving forward. All right, hard subject change here. That's the proportion of the funds. And sorry, I do not have slides for this part of the discussion. But so the consolidated plan you will be working on in the upcoming years. And previously, in past years, a fair housing plan was required. There's some back and forth on that in the previous years. Currently, let me look at my notes here. We are working with the 2021 interim rule. We're waiting on the 2023 final rule to come through, and that should be within the next month or so. It is encouraged for all consortiums to create a fair housing plan at the time of working on their 5-year consolidated plan. And in the past, honestly, right now, until we have the final rule, it's kind of a free-for-all with how you'd like to approach this. But Dennis very wisely has suggested that we look forward to the proposed and what might be coming any day now, the final rule. And it's kind of shifting, they're shifting towards equity plans in the future and a little bit away from what's called analysis of impediments. Analysis of impediments previously was demographic data, trying to assess local issues, looking at policies, codes, fair housing complaints filed with HUD, and of course, interviews with stakeholders. And it looks like the equity plan is moving much more toward, some of their goals are giving underserved communities a greater say in the actions. Streamlining, HUD hopes to streamline the equity plan's required fair housing analysis for us. Placing greater focus on fair housing goals. So it's much more about those underserved populations and a focus on engagement with those populations in the planning process. So a lot more interaction with lower income populations, just to kind of generalize what's coming up. So a lot more intentional engagement with impacted populations is what we're looking at. But I'll be reaching out to my HUD contacts to see when we can expect a hard date for the final rule. And you have to have that plan in, I think 100, 180 days, something like that, before the consolidated plan. And, but I'll get back to Dennis as soon as I hear from HUD when we have a solid date and some solid bullet point minimum requirements for that plan. Exciting stuff. All right, I think that was my part. Did you need me to touch on anything else?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll add to what Tracy just said is that in the past, we have not been required to submit to HUD for approval from the Fair Housing Marketing or AFFA planning efforts. And the big sea change that we're all going through across the United States. So, planning perspective, it's going to require us to be a lot more intentional going forward about the types of activities that we would undertake. Justification for them. So you can understand why very early on I've spoken about fair housing and how important it's going to be going forward. Okay? Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Dana. The last 2 points, reparations. I've spoken about that a few moments ago. That is a huge, huge opportunity to address some wrongs that have happened over the years. Frankly, one of the many reasons that Asheville was very attractive to me. The opportunity to do right better, the reparations efforts, that take a hard look at how we operate. So I'm grateful for that opportunity, and I have no doubt that for all of you representing your communities, that as we go forward and incorporate what we're learning from those committees, that it will be valuable information and helpful to you all as part of your planning efforts. The last one, public housing authorities are very, very important. And each one of our jurisdictions has a public housing authority. They too obviously are in the business of providing housing, not in the traditional sense. Many housing authorities are now builders, and they're competing with you all. RAD is a very, very important tool, and that's not going to go away anytime soon, I don't think. There's parts of home that can fit very nicely with RAD because RAD is kind of privately owned, so that makes it nice. So the very idea of having dialogue with our housing authorities going forward makes a lot of sense too. So those are the long-range goals for us during the upcoming year. In the immediate, we need to address our application process. And we need to do it in such a manner that when we put it out there for consumption, that it sets forth what we will be looking for, explains what we have to have as a participating jurisdiction in order to evaluate an application and to make recommendations on whether to fund it or not. So rental housing and thinking that sooner or later the state will be releasing the application for tax credits, we did not want to be in a situation whereby we were not ready to have something ready to go. So our plan is to not only address the other sources of money that we have that are available, to have such a plan created and ready to go by the time that we open up our annual application process for CDBG. So target this year is by January. To do that, and I'm going to defer back to the chair in just a few moments, to do that, we've enlisted TDA, and we will work with a small group of folk to help us to put the application together, and that will be the template that we will use for this upcoming process. We will go back and address the other uses of home funds later, but for right now, our goal is to get a rental application, a new one, out and ready to go by December, and have it available to the public by January of next year. We will also come up with new policies and procedures with respect to how we're going to be doing all of this. And we will also, in future meetings with you all, providing more training that helps to explain the decisions that we're making going forward, so that with regards to the delivery of services, we're doing it in a manner that's consistent with program rules and guidelines, but also true to the fact that, as Tracy spoke about a few moments ago, there is a disparity between what's going on here in Asheville and Buncombe County versus other counties that are part of the consortium. So we need to do better. And part of this process will allow us to be able to do that with your help. Are there questions of me and what I've been speaking of thus far? Jeff?
Maybe what I'll do, maybe what I'll do is repeat the questions.
Okay.
I don't know that I'm, oh, I am working, okay, go ahead.
I was talking about the pro-housing grant that had come out, and one of my questions that I got back was, I spoke with Mills River, how do you become a member? If you're a jurisdiction within the four-county area and you'd like to be a member, I don't know what that process is. I'm new to this organization as well. And do we reach out annually for that, or do we contact those? I had done a little research on the pro-housing. I can pass it around, but just of this HUD's own on what jurisdictions or priority geographies in our areas. Some of them are not sitting here and not a member group. You reach out to those, and what is the process for someone who wanted to be a member, and we are within that area? I didn't know. I wanted to ask that for them or anyone else interested. And this is, I just pulled these numbers together from that priority geography, and you can see some of those aren't represented that are priority geographies, and are they being represented in this consortium? A good question for us to ask.
Okay,
Yeah,
do you want me to summarize the question? Because we're live and not everybody could quite hear that.
Go ahead.
So in summary, the question is, this consortium is made up of different geographic areas, and if you are not in a current member of the consortium, how does one become a member? And does this body on the whole ever set out a process for seeking new membership or including new areas? And then we've shared a document that shows some of the areas that are in our zone or region but are not yet part of the consortium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jeff, for the question. One of the things that I would like to implement, and I thank you for that question, I'm going to ask Christina, and this will be kind of the norm from this point on. When we're asked questions like this and the information will be beneficial to everybody on the commission, I'm going to actually have her send the memo out on policy, both HUD policy, and then what you all decided as a consortium and how to do that. So that way everyone has the question and you'll have the same answer from Christina or from myself, okay? I can't answer the question right now, but we will. And we'll make certain everybody gets the answer in writing.
Helpful. I would assume that there is some level of administration that becomes too complicated or too large a body at some point that could become too complicated, but we'll get a uniform response out. Any other questions? Or does anybody want to share how they're feeling about this process? I know many of you were on when I joined, and I became the chair of our housing board for the city, which automatically made me the chair of this board. I didn't know that at the time. I hadn't been involved with this board before, so I had a big learning curve as well, and I felt like the review I did with Dennis last week, because I had seen this presentation and sat down with him, helped me out so much. So I hope it has helped you out as well, and some members of the public that are watching along that have kind of wondered what it is we're really doing here. But any other questions or thoughts you want to share? Adorations of our new 6-month new division manager?
Almost 6.
Almost 6. I guess if you do have a comment or a question, you can say it and I can repeat it, or you can come grab a mic. Go ahead. Sure. We have Judge Candidate Robin Merrill here.
So I've probably been on this consortium board longer than anyone else sitting here, and if I'm mistaken about that, forgive me. And I too got a preview of this presentation from Dennis last week, and I learned things that I didn't know in my tenure here. So I really appreciated that. You know, and as an attorney in my day job, I understand the importance of doing what HUD says, because they come with a really big stick and they will demand their money back. Even if you're destitute, they want their money and they will get it. So I think we all want to follow the guidance to the letter so that we're not putting ourselves, the city of Asheville, in that situation, but also because that means we can't accomplish our goal, which is having more affordable housing. So I want to say thank you for bringing your expertise, Dennis, and for doing this presentation. And change can be hard. I was thinking about like the fair housing requirements, which I'm really excited about, but also know this is an entirely different way of operating, and that's going to be tough as we learn that. Also thinking of projects as the number of units versus the project as a whole. Although we'll be evaluating the project as a whole, we'll be thinking about we're going to fund X number of units in this project, and that's also a change from what we've done in the past. And there's more, no doubt, but I think we're getting on the right track, so thank you. Thank you, Sage.
Thank you for the comments, Robin. Anyone else? Everything to share? Everybody's feeling good about this next path forward? I'm feeling pretty good about it. Go ahead.
You know, at the end of the day, sir, I see an opportunity for a couple of things to happen. I doubt very seriously if the core group of cities changes that much, but what I am hopeful for is that all of you who are currently members, that we're helping you to reach out to organizations that have no knowledge that this opportunity exists, and you become their sponsors, in essence, to help guide them through the process, to direct them to us, to help get them where they need to be at. Because at the end of the day, one of the things that we didn't talk about, but we will, is as members go, you have a lot of sway with respect to whether an activity in your community should be funded or not. Simply for the fact that based upon what you're hearing and what you will hear, you know, everything from where it's going to be located at, to the support services that are going to be part of that project, to the dollars that your community may in fact be investing, all of those things are very much a part of the discussion that we need to hear. In addition to that, as you heard Tracy say, the very fact that when we are addressing the subject of equity, our previous efforts in relation to fair housing, I think, have scared a lot of people because it's been so rigid in law to the respect that it's become this way. And there's another way. There's a much more genteel way to address the issue of a problem. And the problem is that, you know, we have some challenges. So as part of the long-range planning effort, all of those things are things that you know in your respective communities. With Land to Sky, they'll have a handle on it too because they're available to help you, but they'll share information with us. But at the end of the day, to answer your question, I do think a lot of that will come basically from the relationships that you all have with organizations that in your community that are either doing housing or hope to.
So would it be an amount of money, how, you may not know, but would you be saying X% of the home funds we have are set aside for this program that people can come and apply and obviously qualify and all that? Or is it, I don't want that to eat in, knowing that we don't have that capacity everywhere, and knowing that we won't for years, and thinking about equity partially, but also supporting the idea of not, if we can make it easier. I like what you're thinking there. I'm just wondering, how do we keep that from eating in? And it may not, the way you're thinking about doing it. I just don't want it eating into funds that folks, because it looks, when we look at our population percentages, Henderson's the only one that's under, well, the two small ones are overrepresented, so to speak, by money. Henderson's under, Buncombe's right about correct, if you count Asheville, which you would. And I just want to think about how we account for that and be ready for it. And can't wait forever, but I'm just curious about how much money that is and how, who would approve it and how it would work.
You get to repeat
Yeah,
it
let
and
me,
answer it.
I'll consolidate. For those listening at home, I know we have thousands of people joining us today. So the question is, if we are looking at a new program that was referenced as OTC, over the counter, meaning it wouldn't be a part of a calendared application process per se, what amount of funds would we put towards that effort? Would that detract from the funds that we normally allocate towards LIHTC projects? And when and how are we going to talk about all that?
So OTC, I'm going to try to remember to answer all of the points, and if I forget, then I'll be politician and pivot to something else, okay? OTC will be contingent upon figuring out how much money we have actually available, and that's in process right now. It should not detract necessarily from organizations that are seeking to get funding for a tax credit proposed project. At least that's my hope. Now, to implement it is going to require a great deal of discussion amongst all of you, because you're going to, in essence, come back and tell me a system that may put weight on certain types of projects that you've not done before, as well as the locale of those projects. For instance, if it's a project that's somewhere in a rural area, and the nature of that project is such that, you know, not only are we addressing the need for affordable housing, but we're addressing water and wastewater concerns too, that could conceivably receive more points than a project in an urban area that's not necessarily addressing those kind of things. But those are the discussions that we will have as a group, and from a united standpoint, you all will tell us how to do it.
Any other questions? You know, when I did my little sit-down last week, I said, in my experience on this consortium, we have looked at the application pool who are putting forth NCHFA applications, and we've said, oh, we've got 4, so let's take our total money and divide it by 4. And when we come back in August, we'll give it to whoever was awarded. And what I'm seeing in this process is that we might actually develop a greater strategy where perhaps some of the money is reduced for an OTC product, but we go really all in on one and really empower their application. That may be what comes of this, I don't know. I mean, it's all up for group discussion, but I saw that as a potential great avenue, great new process. And then it could offer this other uncalendared application period as well. Just my 2 cents. Any other thoughts or questions for Dennis or any of us?
I just on that consolidated plan, that 5-year process with Land to Sky, do you have an idea of how you think that will, or does Land to Sky have an idea of how they think that process is going to play out? In other words, will they reach out to each jurisdiction's planning departments and bring those on board as well? Or, how does this body play into that as well?
There will be
Oh, just a second. The question is just whether or not Land of Sky will, when and how they'll be brought to the table, and what does that look like?
There will be a heightened awareness for greater citizen participation for all of our jurisdictions. It will not be cursory. It will be significant. And we need to do that because we need to hear not only from you all representing your communities, but we need to hear from the people, the nonprofit organizations that represent the needs of the community, be it the elderly, be it the persons who have impairments, be it people who identify as BIPOC, all of that. And we need to do a better job of documenting. We need to do a better job of communicating. So, in our meetings, we will make certain that we have special efforts that are targeted at the people who do not speak English as a primary language, and we will do better.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Maybe. I'm sorry, I'm kicking you out of your spot. I just wanted to say I'm really, really excited about all the work that's going to be happening and has already happened, so thank you so much. As a small jurisdiction, or a small municipality within the jurisdiction, I'm very excited specifically about the technical assistance and kind of that capacity building that you're talking about within our world as a consortium, but also as people who are working in the housing field in general throughout the community. So I would love a little bit more information on the type of capacity building that could perhaps be done not only for us, but as we look, to the broader housing efforts within the region.
Thank you for that. You still got the award for being the first person here today, okay? We are committed. We, councilperson Nikki, the city of Asheville, we are committed to trying to expand upon ways, of increasing the supply of affordable housing. And part of that is the responsibility to provide technical assistance to organizations that have a desire to do it. So you'll hear a lot more from us. We'll be visiting your community. Christine and I have already been out to several places. We'll continue to do that. We want to know how we can help y'all do what you do better. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, just keep moving on down the line. Wanted to echo the sentiments and say thank you so much for your presentation. I'm among the newer members here. I replaced Ben Woody, and so this is my first in-person meeting and first time in the full cycle for home. So this is tremendously useful to understand my role in all of this. You had referenced that 20 years go by quickly. The next 30 days will go by in a blink. I'm wondering, I'm eager to get into this, but I'm wondering what that requires for members and what the immediate next steps are for participating members in this board to make that a reality.
There we go. Thank you. And yes, 30 days are going to go by very quickly. The chair and I have spoken, and the vice chair and I have spoken. Stephen and Christina and I have spoken as well, and Nikki too. And we do have a plan, and we will be able to meet that period. can I put you on the spot for a minute, Steve, and just have you kind of talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, so, I mean, a couple of things. First, from a broader context, right, in terms of doing this kind of work all over the country, a lot of local PJs historically have, run this, hey, we've got this much money. Everybody that's proposing everything from CDBG Community Services to a tax credit deal all comes in. We kind of lay it on the table and try to figure out how to make it all work. And often that's done ahead of your annual action plan process, so that your annual action plan says, these are the projects. If you look at how states or some of the really big cities, the Chicagos of the world and that kind of thing, do that, they don't take the applications in advance. They kind of say, hey, this year we're going to put this much into this activity area, this much into that activity area. And, you basically break your program into a series of different local home programs, and then you can run the rental in a way that lines up to the way that that cycle tends to work in your state, based on how the state tax credit allocator, lines stuff up. Because at the end of the day, over 90% of all affordable rental housing being built in this country involves tax credits. So if home's going into rental, it's likely going into a project that involves tax credits, and you kind of need to mold your application process around whatever your state's timetable is. And trying to have everybody else come in at the same time may not end up making sense. So you can, part of that is just thinking about it. From the PJ standpoint, you have the capital home program, but then you really have, I've got a rental program, I've got a homeowner rehab program, I've got a TBRA program, and each of those can be structured in its own logic and its own, like, what's our cycle look like, when can people come in, and those cycles don't have to all line up to one another. So that is that's just something to keep in mind in terms of it can help you find a way to better manage to get what it is you're after. In terms of the rental application, an application for rental itself, the application document is mostly a cover sheet, right? Like, give me the address, give me the email addresses, all of that. But most of the substance is really in the, hey, show us, like, you have site control over a piece of property. You've already started to do a market study. Here's my preliminary estimate of how many units, what the income targeting is, all of that. So it's not that hard to put an application together rather quickly, because it's not this multi-page questionnaire, and we're not as you might with a tenant who's coming in for TBRA, you're not doing income verifications and all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of that infrastructure is kind of already in place. The stuff that you're going to ask for, we might title it a little bit differently or that, but it's the stuff that they're going to have to submit to the state for credits anyway, and this and that. And so it should, it's not that hard to, we've already got kind of an 85% framework that we can drop into, any place in the country, and like, hey, this is kind of, everybody's going to ask about site control. Everybody's going to ask about this. What is it that you want to prioritize in terms of site selection? Are you more interested in what school district it's in versus its walkability? That kind of fine tuning. So we've been kind of pulling from our library of work with jurisdictions across the country, and have a starting point example of, here's a set of program guidelines. Here's what an RFP can kind of look like. Here's the list of exhibits that really make up the guts of an application. And then moving on to, here's everything you need before you get to closing, right? A developer's not going to have spent 6 figures with their architect only to apply and have building-ready plans and specs at initial application. That doesn't make sense. But we're not going to close until we've got that, right? And then, all the way through to the written agreement, all the legal documents, and those sorts of things. So we've got a lot that, we can work from, but then customize to the particular, local flavor and local priorities. So I don't think, that's really a matter of kind of, Christina and I were going through a lot of that this morning to say, hey, like, here's kind of what we see this looking like, how we've done it with other folks. Here's a couple of different, like, here's an example from here, here's an example from there. You're going to see a lot of commonality, but also between it, you see some of the different, dial this up or dial that back. And so I think that what we will be able to do very quickly is get a sort of base. We drop in Asheville, we drop in North Carolina instead of Louisiana, right, or whatever. And then we can kind of go through and sit down with everybody to say, okay, these are these are key decision points. These are things that they just are what they are because it's the regulation. If we have questions, we can talk through that. And then these are the kind of business terms that we would recommend to the city as the PJ, right, as the one that's legally responsible to HUD. These are business terms that we build in to protect your interest in not having to repay HUD, but also to make sure that we're getting the benefit that we want, and all of that. So that should make it, I think, easier to kind of move this relatively quickly and be in a position to be taking applications shortly after the first of the year so that you can have, what fundamentally the home program would, their term of art would be a preliminary award, right? Hey, we took the applications, we kind of ran the process, and we said, of our 5 suitors, we decided these are the 2 that we're going to, move forward in the process with. It doesn't mean that we're actually going to get to the closing. But yeah, if everything they told us, if they can prove that all up and bring it all in, and they can actually get the credits from the state, then we'll get there. And be in a position to provide, some form of a preliminary award that says to the state, in effect, like, yeah, when they say that they're going to get money from Asheville, Asheville's set aside the money. It's not legally binding because it can't be. But these are the parameters that if they pull it off in this way, and the state award is the same thing. Like, nobody's fully committed until everybody's closed, right? And we're all kind of looking and making sure, is what they're showing me, is what I'm getting really what they promised? And where it's not, are we all okay with the natural little changes that happen because, the Fed just raised interest rates, or the tax code changed and the value of tax credits just changed, that kind of thing. Does that?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, any other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, I think you've done your job
Thank you, ma'am.
and done it well. I'm really excited for these changes. And do we want to try and recruit some folks, or? Okay,
do.
so in this 30-day window, we're hoping that some of you would like to sit down to spend some extra time with Dennis and I, and maybe talk about some of these more details. I'm going to tell you, I wondered specifically if Kate would. I'm almost nominating you. Would you join us? Oh, good. Is anybody interested in this in particular? I know that Kate often speaks up, and I've just appreciated her input, so I thought, Kate would probably like to be on this. But is anybody in particular interested in joining us for these? Okay. Anybody else? How many people do we want? Maybe 4 or 5? And you'll be with us staff, so we don't want too many people. And then, of course, it will come back to this body, but we recognize you're all very busy. So 2 people. Anybody else? Robin? Robin's in. All the ladies. A good question. A couple meetings?
I would say no more than 2, and Christina and Steve will be leading those meetings. So, and Steve said a lot of that work has already started. So, I would say no more than 2.
All right. Forrest, Emily, Kate, we've got them. And Robin. Okay.
Beautiful.
I think that's good, and I'll be there as well. I think that's all we have for today.
That is it.
Okay, so if there's no other comments or additions, we can go ahead and adjourn and just say thank you to everyone for coming and seeing us in person. Maybe we'll get to do it again in person. All right.
Actually, out before 6 o'clock, so.
Thank you, everyone. We are officially adjourned.
Do we need a motion?
No, I mean, unless you want to stay and vote on it, but.